Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L, and now let's talk Death March episode 10. And we continued on with the plot. The video I released yesterday, I was talking like I didn't know what they wanted to do with this, but no, we just kind of continued on with the story. This is going to be very interesting because, well, they're still very conclusive, and I think we still have that one episode left. So pretty interesting, really, as we're going through this. You can still see that we're kind of wrapping up the little things from the previous arc, so this is just kind of like an intermission. Oh, right, intermission. The web novel does intermission chapters, so if we're adapting that right now, that makes sense. Anyway, this episode though, when we were going into it, at the beginning I was thinking, and this is where like my memories of the manga were also just kind of going down, because I didn't read the manga for this one because I thought it would be a one-off thing. But we ended up starting off very slice of life, and I thought, okay, this is going to be very interesting because now we're going hard into the Death March style of slice of life, and that could be something that maybe a lot of people aren't that interested in. Oh, sorry, my words and my voice. It's not something that people could be that interested in. So it becomes a question of like how compelling are the characters, or how adorable are the characters to watch. And when you consider the adorableness, the kids, Pochi and Tama, they have their adorable sequences in this episode. And just to speak on them before we get into like the nitty gritty stuff, Pochi and Tama, we start off their whole little thing with Sato just watching them from afar, and we know that he sees them as their little like. He sees them like nieces, pretty much. And so seeing him get involved with them, giving them things to do, giving them fun things to do, and finally culminating it with the girls catching prey properly. I think in this case it was Tama that was catching the prey, if I recall correctly. Pochi did pretty well, Tama messed up, and then they came back and they worked on it together. Overall, when it comes to the relationship, or just the taking care of the children, it's adorable. It's like one of those adorable things. It's one of those things that humanizes Sato, and it's one of those things that does make him stand out a little bit from the other harem protagonists. So on a fundamental level, I do really appreciate that. But aside from that, I do think that overall, for like an average viewer, I do think this episode could be boring if you aren't really that invested into the other aspects of Death March. For instance, a lot of things outside of Pochi and Tama, like personally, I find the cuteness thing something entertaining. I find that aspect of it entertaining. But otherwise, the other slice of life elements, when they're just solely slice of life, they may not kind of hit you there. Thankfully, though, it was worse at the beginning, and then for me personally, as we went into the episode, it got a little bit more interesting, because as we got into the episode, we started going into the giant mystery of what exactly are the giant, I forgot what they're called. Let's call them the gate stones or whatever, or a gateway. We touched on a bigger mystery. We touched on a weird memory of a girl. We touched on some pretty interesting lore bits. So that was when it was like, okay, well, this is really cool. And as serving for a conclusion of a season, it's kind of hooking the viewer into like wanting to know, oh, okay, what's gonna happen next? So that was pretty neat. And then this is my personal favorite part when it came to Death March. Reading it, it's specifically the problem that Sato had with the item box versus storage. I really liked him taking the time to work out the intricacies of the powers. That's something I really enjoy from light novels or whatever material in general, just when they're working on the intricacies. So seeing it here, I had a smile on my face. I really enjoyed it. It's a really simple thing, and it's really boring to watch like play out in general, but it's neat. It touches me somewhere, and I really enjoy it. Anyway, so let's go in a little bit deeper. Let's start with the weird reincarnation thing. So that whole sequence, like, this is something as well. I remember it from the manga. The first time I went through the manga, I remember this whole sequence, and it's just every time it's still a very weird one. This time though, the anime did make a few more things clear to me, and now it might also be because I know of a few events further on in the web novel that might also help me out. But the things that I would really like to point out with that little sequence is that, and mind you, I don't think I have a proper understanding of it, but you have this person talking of a human falling in love with a deity, you have the talk of reincarnation coming in, and then you have the game maker or the programmer logic coming back into everything, where like when Sato's done thinking about this whole story, he like remembers, oh, I think I once made a game that had these pillars as a thing in it, or I think I used this setting as something for the game. And then he's like wondering if his memories of making that game are actually like, if he's mistaking them for memories of his childhood. And that's a very interesting like little like lore bit to throw out there, right? Because now it's playing into that hand, like the girl saying that there was a human falling in love with a deity and that there was a way to like for them to be together if they reincarnated through. I think that's what I kind of made out from the broken dialogue. And when you have that, it's like, well, okay, was Sato the deity? And then when you throw in the thing about the game making, when you throw in that little hint that he's giving you there, you know, if Sato was the developer for a game, it's not inconceivable to call him a god, because from the perspective of him being a maker, he is the god of the world he creates. So from that perspective, it's interesting. But then you have to like start asking the question, if this were true, why or what is it about this girl that justifies her as being special? Why is it that his creations are special? What's actually going on here, right? But you know, it's just a matter of to what degree are we saying that Sato is a deity in this case? Is he a deity from the beginning and then he just went to the human world, now he reincarnated back into another world? Or was he human first and then became deity after he made the game? It's just little things like that. And unfortunately, I found it to still be kind of inconclusive to be able to make any kind of final, or I guess to just be able to like get it down under control. And for me in particular, I know that some details were revisited later on in the web novel in particular, but those details were so far and few in between that I did not, it was harder for me to try and put them together, and I have not gone back through the web novel to actually go and put those finer details together. So if you guys have any ideas, or if you guys know better than I do, let me know in the comments down below. I would totally be into reading it. Right now, I think the mystery that they set up there though is pretty interesting. Like, it has some pretty interesting parts, and I especially like adding in the unreliable narrator property of Sato not being sure where exactly his memories are coming from, whether they are from childhood or whether they are from a game. And let's see, any other little details from that little bit that I thought was interesting. No, there was like the talk about the dance, and that was something. Anyway, for that bit, I really enjoyed it. It made the episode worth it for me, along with the skill box and the storage system. So going on from there, let's go into the nuances that come with the power acquisition system. So this is something that, okay, first let me premise. We're going to be talking now about the things that we learned, or how would I phrase this? We're going to be talking about the things that are the weaknesses of Sato's skill acquisition system. Because if there's something that we've noticed across all of Deathmark, is that the skill acquisition system, like the system that lets Sato learn languages, the system that lets Sato walk on water by just trying, it's really overpowered. But it does have a pretty funny nuanced weakness. That being, and Arisa really captures it perfectly when she said, it's like someone good is trying to play badly. So this is cool, because we saw this happening before when Sato was teaching little girls about what happens when water evaporates. Sato, what the skill acquisition system does for him is that it does give him the ability to do something, but it doesn't give him the ability to apply it properly. And so we get that perfectly summed up by Arisa saying, it's like someone who is really good at this is trying to play badly, where we know what's actually going on is that Sato just doesn't understand the logic of what he's doing. And we also saw this earlier with the sewing thing. Sato can sew very quickly, but he doesn't know, and this is hard to describe. What would you say is knowing that you have to tie a knot to a thread so that sewing works properly? What would you call that? That's just common sense of sewing, or that's just like the technique maybe. Well, no, because you could say like, well, he has technique when it comes to the actual sewing motion. But you know, it's that kind of feel. Sato doesn't know the technicalities that go into the skill. So if he ends up hitting that, he's going to have that trouble with applying the skills. So it's a very interesting problem to give a character. It's a very interesting problem to give I guess, a system. But when you think about it from the perspective of a video game, in a video game, if you get sewing, then you're going to be able to create cloth automatically. In a video game, there's never going to be the thought of, oh, what actually goes into sewing? Oh, you actually have to tie a knot to the thread so that it doesn't fall apart. So when you consider it from the what a video game does with its skills, in that it's very limited in the in the logistics of how it actually works, it makes sense what's going on with Sato's threading. But it's just really neat. This is like a neat little thing, and I really enjoy it because that's cool. That's a cool little detail. If anything, the Death March author really thought out, or really gave his system some pretty cool little nuances. And I guess since we're talking here, let's go over very quickly to magic. Sato makes the observation, and this is again strengthening the thing that or the idea that the person that made this world was a programmer. But he goes into the logic of magic, and he like mentions that yeah, things go together like as if it was programming. And you know, I'm gonna be just like critical just for the sake of humor here, but like, look, man, I understand what they're trying to say. I understand what they're trying to say when they say that like the magic follows programming logic. But what does programming logic actually mean when these people are like applying it here, right? Programming logic, when it comes to programming, it's equal parts acknowledging the rules of the language itself, and these could be like simple things such as putting an apostrophe at the end of a code line. It's things such as acknowledging the order of events that you're doing things in. So this is the same as saying like, if you let me think of a scenario. Okay, no, it's gonna be a bit too difficult to think about this right now. So the first thing is observing the rules of the language, and this is just pretty much like knowing your grammar. The second thing is knowing the order of operations so that you don't screw something up. So this is pretty much the distinction of knowing whether or not to multiply before you add. If you think back to school, if you think back to BODMAS, it'd be pretty much knowing which order to apply those kind of operations to a calculation. Hierarchy, I think hierarchy would go into it, especially if you're working with classes. And then another thing of the logic I would say are just knowing logical operators such as and, or, and just what those operations do. So you would have to also know the axioms of logic. So you have to know what 2 zeros together does. You have to know what multiplying 2 zeros together, or what happens when you add 2 ones together in terms of binary. So you know, like, there's a lot of distinct rules that go into it, and then you look at what they're saying is the equivalent for this system. And you know, look right there at this picture. There's an atom. Why is there an atom? How are you going to work this out? And then you have Sato going in and doing copying and pasting. All I take away from this is that it really looks more like this. The formulas are more about making sure that the pathways are matched up and going in the right way. And then when you consider that there's a lot of words written there and that there's chanting, it really just seems like it's, again, instead of it being programming logic, it really just seems like it's more like making pieces fit together. It's like, you know, you're playing one of those games that has those pipes, and then you have to make the pipes match up so you can get the water to flow from one end to the other. That's what it actually seems more like. But that's just me being critical. That said, it's just, the point is taken. They're just saying that this runs under programming logic, and therefore Sato is able to understand it relatively easily. And there's nothing wrong with that. Other series or other light novels with this subject matter do the same thing. We had the same we had the same gimmick being done in Knights of Magic. Not a big deal. But yeah, it was interesting to see it work out, and it was interesting to see that Sato can create magic. So that was pretty cool. That said, I do want to demystify programming. Like, programming is the same as learning another language. You learn the rules of the language, and then the other things that you have to learn are just the consequence of the sequence of events that you're writing in. Because if there's ever going to be a place where someone's going to be tripped up during programming, especially at the beginning stages, it's going to be adhering to the rules of the language, and also just understanding the consequence of when things are not done in the right sequence. That's pretty much the basics of programming. When I see it there with Death March, you know, it's just funny to point it out. Let's see. Otherwise, what other things did we get in the episode? Because those are the big points right there. And like, you know, then we have the storage box and the item box. You know, the storage box pauses things, keeps them in stasis pretty much. Item box lets things progress in time so Sato can take advantage of it. Nothing really groundbreaking to talk about there other than it was cool that Sato took the time to figure it out. But yeah, I'm just gonna go through my notes real quick to say what we got left. Oh yeah, so there was a note about Mia not eating meat. All I'm gonna say is don't trust the girl. But it was very cute when she pointed out that she doesn't eat meat because she's an elf. Moving on, Nana likes cute things. We saw this when the girls all wanted stuffed toys. Nana especially likes cute things, and if you haven't noticed, Nana has a very particular way of speaking. It's charming. Let's see. Anything else? The horse's name is Guy. We saw the Ratman. Oh, Sato bought the Ratman slaves from the trader. That's an interesting note because it's just a note that Sato's playing by the rules of the world and not trying to be super heroic about it. And yeah, there was a little shot of Mia getting squished by Nana. And I just love that they put a little detail in there. So yeah, guys, those are all my thoughts. If I missed anything, let me know down below. And until next time, I hope you have a great day.